I think a dangerous precedent was set in the advent of Vine, in particular in regards to minors. Now, conservatives on the right have regularly talked about the dangerous sexualization of our youth on social media and the way that the algorithm has essentially encouraged this phenomenon. But strangely, I haven't seen left of center liberals or even just liberals in general bring up this fact. And the further left you go, it seems as though there's almost a deliberate ignorance in regards to this topic when it really should not be defined on political lines. We all support the liberation of women, but women implies adult. And the thing about our children is that they are obviously not developed, their cognitive faculties are not developed enough to make the kind of decisions about their body and their dressing and the things that they do online that an adult with fully developed faculties can. So therein lies the question, what should parents or the government do about hostile algorithms that essentially target these young girls to show them content that is sexual in nature, that encourages this kind of promiscuity and cultural degeneracy, putting them in direct harm or danger. And I think it is fair to use that kind of terminology when referring to this because, again, what we're talking about is minors going out there and showing themselves in a sexual light, and these algorithms feeding them content that directly fuels that kind of behavior. And moreover, the trends that ultimately stem from this person being exposed to this content and then this person and this person and this person, and then the idea spreading like a gene or a virus, the kind of content and the trends that ultimately stem from that create a feedback loop, because as the culture moves more and more in this direction and as it continues being encouraged, more and more people are going to propagate that. And so, because the algorithm is built in such a way as to facilitate the delivery of content that is similar to what you've been viewing, it's going to only further that feedback loop and encourage the creation of content that should not be encouraged in any way. And it's astounding to me that no one on the left is willing to talk about this very pertinent issue in our culture today. Because again, this is about children. This is not about adults being free to wear whatever kind of clothes they want, have whatever kind of promiscuity they want. That's all fine and good. And the government has no place to meddle in the private lives of those people. But when we're talking about private companies directly profiting off of the data and the degradation of minors, then I believe that's a place where the government should absolutely come in and do something. Because this is something that could be directly targeted. Like, whenever we talk about these think of the children arguments with regulation, it tends to be to create broad programs of mass surveillance or broad bans of things for self-respecting and responsible adults in a mass expansion of state power. But when we're talking about something really targeted like this, there's no need for anything like that. In particular, we could go to these companies and have them directly restrict the age. We could make it to where children of a certain age are not allowed to go on there. We could, in the event that children that age do go on there, if they are allowed, make it to where the algorithms function differently or simply are not there, we could have them ban that type of content from minors outright. So if that kind of content ends up on their platform, they have a legal obligation to police it. There are all kinds of things that the government can do that are specifically targeted, aimed at regulating these companies in a similar way to how we already regulate them. And I think by doing that early on, you actually prevent those large, broad laws aimed at quote unquote protecting the children that in reality only serve to increase state power, spy on adults, and control the behavior of adults. Because if these more specific issues are not nipped in the bud in the beginning, they will only become this mass groundswell that continues growing and developing and worsening over time until all of a sudden you have people propagating child sex abuse material, and now the government comes in and says, well, there's this huge issue that continues growing and growing. Now we have to ban all encrypted communication. We have to ban Linux, as one country in particular is trying to do. Like, there's all these hyper-authoritarian laws involving tech that purport themselves to be in direct response to the further victimization of minors that seems to be occurring in the internet age. But I believe if we were to attack these problems at the root, if we were to address the fundamental issues plaguing our culture that lead to these issues, we wouldn't have those big, broad laws that end up affecting responsible adults and doing way more than they say they'll do. So if we were to outlaw trends like this on these social media platforms, we could then protect children further down the line from engaging in this sort of risky and promiscuous behavior and potentially even being exploited. Additionally, doing an overhaul of our sex education and giving it to the kids at an early age so they know what consent is, they know what abuse by adults is, and so on and so on. We could also create a more informed adolescent population that is less liable to abuse. Additionally, addressing the issues surrounding housing, economic instability, a lack of health care, and so on will reduce the chances of victimization by these children, because these children are often from marginalized populations. And by directly attacking that marginalization, I believe this degeneration in our culture and endangerment of our minors could be addressed. But all of these things that I'm talking about are essentially left-wing solutions for a cultural problem that is indeed putting our children in danger. And if more people on the left were talking about this issue that I know is pertinent to many parents, that I know many parents feel strongly about, if we were speaking to these concerns and putting them in both cultural and economic terms, I believe this alternative, this political alternative, could be seen as feasible and as reasonable by more of the general population, because we're speaking in the language of the general population. Well, there may be some extreme feminists out there who find the language that I'm using in this video problematic. I believe that their hyperfixation on the specifics of language gets in the way of policies that are essentially geared towards protecting our youth. And that should be the goal here. The goal should be to crack down on big tech to protect the youth, and additionally, cracking down on the economic disparities that endanger these youth in the first place.